This lesson is centered on another land-based empire, this one being from India. It's called the Mughal Empire. We've taken a look in Chapter 18 at the Ottoman Empire, land-based empire from modern-day Turkey. We took a look at the Safavid Empire with cultural blending from the region of modern-day Iran. Now we're moving a little bit more to the east, and we're going to take a look at the Mughal Empire of India. The Mughals are actually descendants of the Mongols, and that's why they're called Mughals. It really means Mongols, and they did have some cultural blending of their own. They blended with Turks and Afghans as well. And one of the areas that they ruled was called the Delhi Sultanate. Delhi region, Sultanate meaning area of control. Starting around 1000, the Turks actually began to sweep into India, led by a sultan named Mahmud. The Turkish groups that conquered the Hindus in this region, they became known as the Delhi Sultanate. So that's where that comes from, this really ruled by Turks and a mix of Mongols. They treated the Hindu peoples that they had taken over as conquered people. So they didn't treat them on the same level. In 1398, the famous Timur the Lame actually invaded this area from the Afghan region and destroyed the city of Delhi. It was not rebuilt until the 16th century, which would be, of course, the 1500s. Then a ruler named Babur. Babur became the king in 1494 in the region of Uzbekistan and Tajikistan and laid the foundation for the Mughal Empire there. Akbar is one of the more famous rulers that you'll need to know, though. Akbar was Babur's grandson. He ruled India with wisdom and tolerance from 1556 all the way to 1605. That's a very long time in power, which represents that he must have been a good ruler. One of the ways that he ruled was through military conquest. He utilized heavy artillery, sort of copying from the old school style of the Ottomans, and of course that means using cannon. He conquered much of what's called the Deccan Plateau and utilized diplomacy also to gain allies with the group of Indian sort of militaristic governing bodies known as the Rajputs. He was known as sort of a liberal ruler, Akbar. He was known for creating great cultural blending in his court. And for example, he was a Muslim, but he encouraged religious freedom. Most Muslim rulers during this time did not allow for much religious freedom, but this was something that was focused on by Akbar. He had many wives. Two of his wives were Hindu. One of his wives was Christian, and one of his wives was Muslim. So this is an example of obviously not really a religious practice that we're used to as Christian folks at our school, but also you see that he is having a lot of cultural diversity there. He got rid of something called the jizra, which was a tax for non-Muslims. If you weren't a Muslim, you had to pay this tax. But during Akbar's rule, he got rid of that. His chief financial advisor was a Hindu named Todar Mal. He created a fair and effective tax system, which is very similar to what we practice in the United States. It was called a graduated income tax, which taxed a percentage of the value of peasants' crops. Now we have capital D, a flowering of culture. Persia really, or Persian, was the language of Akbar's court. So the people who were his closest advisors, that's what your court is. And so Persian was the language spoken there. But Hindi was the language of the commoners. It's actually a blend of Persian and local languages. Actually, in the military of the Mughals, though, you saw soldiers from many places of Asia coming together, and they actually formed their own blend of language, which is called Urdu. Urdu is a blend of Arabic, Persian, and also Hindi. I'm going to show you what the Mughal Empire looked like during this time so you can kind of see geographically where this was taking place. This is the Mughal Empire under Babur. It's the dark brown region. Here's the city of Delhi. Then Akbar in 1605 adds this a little bit lighter brown, so starting to extend out into this region, parts of the Deccan Plateau. And then another leader that we're going to learn about next, Aurangzeb, then expanded it even further south into India here in the lighter area or region color. Okay. Now, what we're going to take a look at next is going to be talking about Aurangzeb, which was one of Akbar's successors. But first, we're going to take a look at a couple named Jahingar and Nur Jahan. Akbar died in 1605. His son was Jahingar. He was next in power. But his wife, Nur Jahan, was actually the more skilled ruler and made most of the decisions during this time period after 1605. His son was actually Khusrau. He led a rebellion against the empire, which is a civil war, which caused turmoil. Khusrau was actually taken in and defended by a group called the Sikhs or the Sikhs. The Sikhs are a generally nonviolent religious group that blended Buddhism, Hinduism, and Sufism. So there's an example of cultural blending right there in itself. The Sikh leader Guru Arjan took Khusrau in, and because of this, the Mughals, which would be Nur Jahan and Jahingar, Khusrau's parents, arrested Guru Arjan and tortured him to death. So they did not take this lightly. And then eventually, Shah Jahan, another one of Jahingar's sons, secured the throne by assassinating all of his possible rivals. He married a Persian princess named Mumtaz Mahal in an arranged marriage, but this would become a love story relationship. She gave birth to 14 children and died at the age of 39, a very young age, in 1631 during the birth of the 14th child. In her memory, Shah Jahan built the Taj Mahal. The Taj Mahal is the white marble palace. It's on the cover of your textbook, famous as being known as one of the most beautiful buildings in the world. It was commissioned to be built by Shah Jahan in honor of his wife, Mumtaz Mahal. It took 22 years to build, and it took 20,000 workers to complete this project. This is, of course, the beautiful Taj Mahal. You can see the white marble structure of it is absolutely gorgeous. And then there's also a reflection pool that is situated a distance away that you can see the reflection of the Taj Mahal also. Remember, this was built in honor of Shah Jahan's wife, Mumtaz Mahal. It's a very, very popular tourist attraction in India today. Okay, but to build the Taj Mahal, the people suffered. Shah Jahan raised heavy taxes to build structures such as the Taj Mahal and others, and this put a great deal of stress on the people of India, or in the Mughal Empire, you could say at that time. Famine, lack of tools, lack of roads, lack of irrigation were also problems that led to a dire, stressful situation in the Mughal Empire. Aurangzeb is next in power. He's one of Shah Jahan's sons. He took power after a bitter civil war with his brothers. He eventually took control and ruled from 1658 to 1707. He expanded the empire, as we saw on the previous map, but mostly to the south. During this time, though, the empire's power began to decline. One of the reasons was he was very oppressive to the people. He enforced strict Islamic law. He outlawed drinking, gambling, and other vices. He brought back that tax on non-Muslims called the jizra, and he did not allow Hindus to practice their full religious freedom. So this is an example of oppression where you don't allow personal and independent freedoms within the empire. The Hindus, the Rajputs, and a group called the Marathas, these are all militant groups, they began to lead rebellions against Aurangzeb. The Sikhs, generally known for being nonviolent, also became militant and rebelled against the Mughals. Arangzeb began to raise taxes again, and this led to greater anger in the empire. The reason he needs to raise taxes again is to help fund his defense against these several militant uprisings. And for Roman numeral 4, we'll talk about the empire's decline. We've taken a look at some of the problems. You can kind of see the writing on the wall there, but during all of these wars, 2 million people in the Mughal Empire throughout India died due to famine. As the central power of the Mughal leader declined, local lords and independent leaders began to take power, which is sort of similar to a situation like feudalism, where you have local rulers starting to gather power. Eventually, though, India would fall to European groups. The most notable would be the Portuguese first. We're also going to see the Dutch, the French, and the English start to take hold in the region of India.